Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 340 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's reading finishes out the book of Acts with chapter 28, and we also pick up with Ephesians chapters 1 and 2. For my commentary, I'm going to be looking at Acts chapter 28. I really want to finish out on our reading for this. And one thing I just have to say, to me, the book of Acts comes to an abrupt stop. You're left wishing, could Luke not have written more? Could he not have talked about the everyday life of Paul while he was in Rome? I don't know. I don't know why he stops where he does. There's obviously a lot more that takes place, and he pretty much just ends out by saying, and Paul spent 2 years here. So let me pick up, though, with the shipwreck. So the ship has been completely destroyed, and they find themselves now on an island. Where are we? Well, the people of the island come out to greet them, to assist them, obviously knowing that there's been a shipwreck on the rocks of their island. And as they come out, they are marked as being very hospitable people. And at some point, we know that they must have found out that there were prisoners that were a part of the transport of the ship. The people of the island build a fire, and as Paul and probably the others from the ship are gathering sticks to lay upon the fire, a viper comes out from the wood of the fire and latches on to Paul's hand. Now, at this, the people of the island say, he must have been a murderer because the snake's not letting go and he's going to die. And I know from my time in Africa, vipers are not something to be played around with for certain. Paul just shakes the snake off into the fire. Now, I wonder where Luke was at this moment. Did Luke say, Paul, let me see your hand? Or was Luke looking on thinking, at any moment, I'm going to have to start treating him? The people definitely thought Paul's going to die. This will be it. This man's evil, and he was able to make it out of the sea, but he's not going to make it another hour or two. But nothing happens. And then so quickly, like what happens in real life, the crowd shifts their opinion to a rather extreme version of saying, he must be a god. Well, we're not given details of Paul dispelling his deity, but it is clear that he ends up somehow being able to convince the people that he is not a god. But there is a major landowner or ruler on the island, Publius, and his father is one who has been sick for quite some time. Again, in Luke's way of making any medical situation quite detailed, he says that the father had been suffering from a high fever and dysentery. So we oftentimes get details like that from other writers or authors of books of the Bible. I find it interesting, though, that it's Paul that we find entering into the man's home to see about his medical needs. Now, certainly Luke was there, but Paul goes in and the man is healed. You know, if I was to focus really, though, on any one part out of Acts chapter 28, it's that God's word is unstoppable. I think that there's a lot of spiritual things that are taking place during this whole journey to Rome. I really think that even though the sea is bad at that time of the year, it's not so bad that ships wouldn't normally make this journey. Yes, there are, even to this day, shipwrecks which are found along the same passage that archaeologists discover all these pottery shards and different things from ships of that time period, exactly right at the time period of this particular ship. But clearly, if it was so impassable, no ship would have even embarked that journey at that time of the year. Or they would have made ships that could have withstood the foul weather conditions. But I think that this was a part of the devil's attempt. Weak as it may be, because he's obviously limited in his power, I think it was part of his attempt to try to keep Paul from arriving in Rome, because great things await Paul's arrival in Rome. He might be in chains and a prisoner, but he's there as a witness of Christ to the people. And then we have the snake, the viper. It could have come out and latched onto anybody, but it latches onto Paul. Why not some of the locals? Why not? Why didn't it come out to the person that was lighting the fire, or maybe the person who had gathered up the wood for the fire? No, it comes after Paul. And I think that is significant to note, that the devil was trying, I believe, to stop Paul from going to Rome and proclaiming Christ to the Jews there as well as the Gentiles. And imagine the earful that the soldier that ends up eventually being chained to Paul must have gotten. We do, though, at times think of Paul constantly being on lockdown, but that's actually not what happens. When he arrives in Rome, he's actually given some freedom. It's interesting that even though he's a prisoner, they seem to respect Paul and respect him enough that he's given his own house, the freedom of visitors. What prisoner can really have that many visitors that we end up picturing Paul having come into these new living quarters of his? So while there, at the beginning of his time in Rome, it seems that he does have a fairly steady stream of Jews coming to see him, wanting to know, why are you here? Why were you arrested? And it tells us that as he testified of Christ, there were those who believed, many who believed. But then they would end up having a dispute among themselves, a division among that group. It had to clearly remind Paul of the hardening of people's hearts, which the prophet Isaiah spoke of how the people have a clear, hardened heart. Not all the people, and it's not the majority who believe, but it is people who end up walking away, believing in Jesus as the Messiah. It's the life of Paul is an amazing testimony to us, and should stand as a constant reminder that God's word will go forth, and we need to be willing servants. God's always working in us and around us to bring about his message to this lost world. And we can trust the Lord to fulfill his promises, to sustain us. Paul didn't have the snake latch onto his hand and then say, "Woe is me, all of this, and I'm so close to Rome, and now I'm going to die." But I sometimes know people that's their outcome when difficulty hits. Even though they knew that God was leading them in a particular direction, it's like, well, that's it. That's so much for those dreams. Well, dreams maybe are not the best term, because it's sometimes man's hopes. But when the Lord calls you to a specific task or a place, we must set ourselves on that course. And if something happens along the way to stop it, it happens within the Lord's will. Remember, as I said the other day, there's nothing that will happen in your life that's going to catch God by surprise. So can we not trust him to take us through that event? He clearly knew about it already. Let's trust him to take us the next step of the journey. Brothers and sisters, I do hope and pray that your day's going well. Until tomorrow, God bless.